to revenge with Lyra.
Relax, it's just a joke, my mom said, laughing as my sister mimicked my daughter's hearing aid by cupping her ear and pretending not to hear. The table erupted in laughter, except for me, my husband, and my little girl, Ava. Ava's face flushed crimson. She was only 9, and her small hands trembled as she lowered her fork. I saw her blinking fast, pretending she wasn't about to cry. And my mother had the nerve to add, "Don't be so sensitive, it's family. She should learn to take a joke." That was the moment I felt something in me snap. But before I could speak, before I could even find words, my husband Ethan slowly pushed his chair back. The sound was soft, but it carried the weight of thunder. He stood up, calm, controlled, terrifyingly quiet. Everyone turned to him, expecting another round of awkward laughter. Instead, Ethan pointed to the door. "Out," he said simply. The laughter died instantly. "Ethan, it's family dinner," my sister stammered. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't explain. He just repeated, "Out. You mock my daughter in her own home. You lose the right to sit at her table." Even I was frozen. He wasn't angry, he was done. My mother's jaw tightened, but she stood. My sister scoffed, grabbed her purse. 5 minutes later, they were gone. And I thought that was the end. It wasn't. That night, after the door closed, silence filled the house, the kind that hums with leftover pain. Ava quietly slipped into her room. Ethan followed her, knelt beside her bed, and said softly, "You never have to laugh when someone hurts you. Not even family." I stood in the hallway, hand on the wall, my throat thick with guilt. I'd stayed quiet again. It wasn't the first time my mother and sister mocked Ava. Last Christmas, they'd called her the fragile one. On New Year's, my sister had joked, "At least she can't hear your bad parenting." I'd told myself it was better not to fight, better to keep the peace. But peace had never been their goal. They wanted submission dressed as harmony. When I walked into our bedroom later, Ethan was sitting on the edge of the bed, scrolling through his phone. His jaw was tight. "They don't get to do this again," he said. I hesitated. "They're my family, Ethan." He looked up, eyes sharp, voice low. "And Ava is ours." That single sentence pierced straight through me. He turned his phone screen toward me, an email draft to our lawyer. Subject line, "Termination of property agreement." I frowned. "What is that?" He said quietly, "Tomorrow morning, they'll find out who really owns that house they've been living in rent-free." My heart stopped. I couldn't sleep that night. Ethan lay beside me, calm as stone, while my mind spiraled between shock and disbelief. "That's too much," I whispered into the dark. "It'll destroy them." He turned his head slightly, his voice steady. "They already destroyed something, Maya, your spirit." That hit deep. Because he was right. I'd spent years trying to win my family's approval, bringing gifts, hosting dinners, pretending their insults were just words. When they mocked my marriage, I stayed quiet. When they mocked my daughter, I smiled through tears. Every time I chose silence, they grew louder. By morning, Ethan was already dressed. He kissed Ava's forehead, told her he was going to work, and left. I thought maybe he'd calm down. Maybe he wouldn't actually send that email. But when my phone buzzed at 8:15 a.m., the subject line said it all. "Transfer executed."
Panic flooded my chest.
I called him. He didn't answer. An hour later, my mother called instead, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Maya, what is this nonsense? The landlord says you own this property? Is this some kind of joke?" I didn't reply. Then my sister's voice in the background, loud, panicked. "She's lying. She can't." Ethan's second email arrived while I listened to them yell. It was a single line. "Ownership transferred back to your name this morning. Let's see how funny they find that." By noon, chaos had erupted. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, missed calls, furious texts, voicemails full of shouting. My mother's voice trembled between anger and disbelief. "Maya, you're ruining your own family. How could you let that man take our house?" Our house. The phrase made my blood boil. For 10 years, Ethan and I had quietly paid the mortgage on that house, the one my parents managed after retirement. We let them live there rent-free. It was our way of saying thank you. They never once said thank you back. And now that the papers said my name, suddenly, it was their tragedy. When Ethan came home, I stood at the kitchen counter, gripping my phone. "They're furious," I said, my voice shaking. He poured himself a glass of water.
Good.
"Ethan, my mom's crying. My sister says she's calling a lawyer." He looked up. "Let her. Maybe she'll finally read a contract before mocking a child next time." His words hit like a gavel. Cold, final, but just. That night, Ava sat between us at dinner, eating quietly. Then she said something that shattered me. "Mom, I heard Grandma say I was broken." I froze. Ethan reached across the table and held her hand. "You're not broken," he said softly. "You're stronger than all of them combined." Ava smiled for the first time in days. And I finally began to understand what real strength looked like. The next morning, there was a loud knock on the door. When I opened it, my sister, Claire, stood there, still in her silk robe, hair messy, eyes swollen from crying. "You think you're better than us now?" she snapped. "You let your husband humiliate Mom in front of everyone." I didn't flinch. "You humiliated my daughter." She scoffed. "Oh, come on, Maya. It was a joke. Kids need thicker skin." I stepped closer, my voice sharp but calm. "You don't joke about a child's disability. You just don't." Claire's eyes darted away for the first time, but pride wouldn't let her stop. "So what? You're cutting us off now? We're family." "Family doesn't make a little girl feel less than human," I said. "Family protects. And you failed." Her expression faltered. For a second, she looked almost ashamed. But then her phone buzzed. She glanced down, her color drained. "What's wrong?" I asked, even though I already knew. She looked up at me, her voice trembling. "Mom just got the letter, eviction notice. The house, it's in your name. You actually did it." I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just said, "Actions have consequences." She whispered, "You'll regret this." I stepped back, closing the door between us. "No, Claire," I said quietly. "For once in my life, I won't." The latch clicked. Silence. And for the first time, that silence felt like peace. That evening, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't shouting. It was my father. His voice was low, almost weary. "Maya, you've made your point. Bring the house back under my name. We'll apologize to Ava, all right?" I closed my eyes. "Dad, you don't understand. It's not about the house anymore."
He sighed.
"You've always been too emotional. You let that husband of yours control you. Enough."
My voice cut through his sentence like glass.
"Ethan didn't do this. I did. I told him to." There was silence on the line. Then his tone changed, sharp, almost mocking. "You think power makes you strong? You're still that little girl desperate for approval." I smiled sadly. "Not anymore." He hung up. Later that night, I sat with Ava while Ethan washed the dishes. She leaned against me and whispered, "Mom, are Grandma and Aunt Claire still mad?" "Maybe," I said softly. "But sometimes, when people lose control of you, they call it anger." She nodded slowly, thoughtful. "I like it better when it's just us." Her words melted me. I brushed her hair back and kissed her forehead. Out the window, I could see the faint lights of the house across town, their house. The one that wasn't really theirs anymore. Ethan came to sit beside me, took my hand, and said quietly, "Tomorrow, they'll understand what peace feels like, the hard way." By morning, the whole city seemed to know. Word spread fast in our small circle that the perfect family who bragged about their lake house was being evicted from one they didn't even own. Mom's best friend texted me privately. "She's embarrassed, Maya. She's telling people you forged the deed."
I didn't reply.
I didn't need to. At noon, a moving truck showed up in front of their house. I hadn't sent it, the bank had. The new owners, a quiet retired couple, were taking possession. Mom called one last time, screaming through tears. "Maya, please. They're taking everything." What kind of daughter does this? I stared out the window, watching sunlight flicker across the walls of the home I built with my own hands, the one no one had ever helped me buy. The kind of daughter who finally grew up, I said, and ended the call. That evening, I found Ethan in the backyard, playing catch with Ava. He tossed the ball gently, smiling as she laughed. I realized I hadn't heard that laugh in months. As the sun dipped below the trees, Ethan looked at me. "You okay?" "I am," I whispered. "For the first time, I really am." He nodded toward the horizon. "They had their power for years. Now you have peace. Don't confuse the two." I smiled faintly, watching Ava run barefoot across the grass. Peace looked good on us. A week later, I drove past my parents' old house. The front porch light was off, the yard overgrown, and the air felt heavy with everything unsaid. The new couple who moved in waved politely as they watered the garden. It didn't look like their house anymore. It looked like a chapter finally closed. I parked for a minute and stared at the gate where I used to stand as a teenager, begging my mother to notice me, to say she was proud. She never did. And now, I didn't need her to. Back home, Ethan was brewing coffee. Ava was at the table sketching flowers, her hearing aid gleaming softly under the light. She looked up, smiling. "Mom, can we bake cookies for my class tomorrow?" Her words, so normal and innocent, almost made me cry, because that was what peace sounded like, small, ordinary joy. I nodded, smiling back. "Of course we can, sweetheart." When Ethan handed me a mug, he asked quietly, "Would you ever forgive them?" I thought for a moment. Maybe one day. But forgiveness doesn't mean they get to come back. He smiled, understanding. That night, as I tucked Ava into bed, she whispered, "Mom, thank you for protecting me." Tears pricked my eyes. "Always," I said softly. "That's my job." I turned off the lights, walked